Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would do the Last Stand interview with that Brian Custer and Mr. David Benavidez. I thought that I would do this video probably right before this fight ends up happening. Now, at the current moment in time, it actually is early November, so I'm not really sure when I'm going to release these videos, technically. But I'm probably gonna, release them probably sometime within the next couple of days or sometime within the next week, something like that. I think it's like November 5th today or something like that. But I already did the Demetrius Andrade video, so I thought that I would get this video out of the way as well, or kind of redo it and go into a little bit more depth. But of course, for those of you that don't know the fight that is about to occur in that of November, I believe that the specific date or the exact date is going to be that of November 25th. But David Benavidez, who of course has been labeled by many as the Mexican monster, he's going to be fighting another quote-unquote boogeyman in that of Demetrius Andrade, someone that, many people would claim that he's been avoided by certain fighters, including Canelo Alvarez, all the way from 154 to 160. This is going to be a very important fight for both fighters, which really doesn't need much need for explanation. I think that it's more important for Demetrius Andrade to win this fight in terms of who's going to salvage, more of their career. But maybe I'm wrong because, like I said, if David Benavidez ends up losing this fight, I'm not quite sure how much longer I see him staying at the 168-pound weight division. And I've already stated this, and David has a very motivated goal to become the best fighter of his era or the greatest fighter of his era. Do I believe that he's ever going to achieve that goal? I'm gonna say never, but in my personal view, do I think that he has the skill set to beat someone like the best version of Dimitri Bivol or Artur Beterbiev? Not personally, just my personal view. But we'll see what ends up happening. Anyways, David Benavidez is gonna talk. And this, of course, is going to be a colossal fight. Not only is it a clashing of the styles, because David Benavidez is going to be the pressure fighter in this fight. He is going to be trying to break down Demetrius Andrade incrementally, and basically putting the pressure on him the whole entire time while trying to cut off the ring. While Andrade, if you're him, you probably want to try to use your legs and your feet to your advantage, try to counter him to the best of your ability, while also gaining respect. Andrade, in my view, wants either to push David Benavidez back, or he just wants to make sure that Benavidez is not getting the majority of his punches off. So we'll see what ends up happening. But anyways, let's get into the video. Let's see what both Brian Custer and David Benavidez have to say.
It's the Last Stand. And here is your host, Brian Custer.
That's right, it is the Last Stand. I'm Brian Custer. We bring you the biggest names in the sport. And joining me today is one of the top fighters in the sport of boxing, and at 168 pounds. He's known as the Mexican Monster, El Monstro. Got a new name. David Benavidez, what's up?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing, bro?
Man, it's great to see you again.
Nice to see you always.
Let me also comment on this. A lot of people were stating certain things about David Benavidez and having a black eye in recent interviews. To me, that really doesn't mean a whole lot. All that means is that David Benavidez is doing what he's supposed to do in sparring. Now, of course, you don't want to spar too hard. You don't want to, go to the point to where you get a cut and the fight has to be postponed, or, you get a broken orbital eye bone or a broken hand or a broken jaw, something like that. Of course, that's a little bit too extreme, or you're doing something wrong, or bad accidents can happen. But I've seen many fighters head into a fight with a black eye. I can't really, remember them, but I remember certain fighters heading into a fight with a black eye, and many people would commentate on it and say, oh, someone got knocked out in sparring, someone got their ass kicked and all sort of shit. Well, a lot of the times in sparring, I've never really been big on bragging about what happens in sparring, because a lot of the times in sparring, even though certain people, they do try their hardest in sparring, when you're a professional fighter, you're not really going all out in a sparring match. Now, you are working on certain things. But that's why, especially when it comes to a lot of these channels, like that of the LDBC and new media, I've never really fell for any of this stupid shit about, Dillian White dominated Tyson Fury in sparring, and that's why he's allegedly avoiding him, and then the fight ends up happening, and Fury not only wins every round, but he knocks him out in 6, or, Canelo Alvarez, he looked terrible in sparring, all sorts of stuff. I'm just not falling for this. Basically, what sparring is the practice and the work on things. That's all it is. It's not really a complete full-on fight where, you're completely trying to outdo the other person to the best of your degrees, because it's not a real fight. You're trying to work on certain things. So you are going to probably see someone's more weaknesses, or more of their vulnerability in that of a sparring match. To me, that just never made any sense to really say how a fight is going to play out just because of sparring. Anyone who knows anything about fighting knows that you don't really go by that, but it is what it is.
So November 25th, Showtime pay-per-view, fighting Demetrius Andrade. Tell us why.
Because it's the toughest fight in the division for me right now. Canelo's doing his own thing.
Well, the toughest fight for you, period, is probably Canelo Alvarez. And then the tougher fight after that would probably be David Morrell. Which is funny because a lot of these LDBC and new media channels, they didn't say shit about David Benavidez avoiding that at David Morrell. But once again, you know what? I'm not really going to blame that at David Benavidez, because I don't really consider it a duck if you're going after someone that's more well-known, is going to give you more money, and possibly is going to give you a little bit more credit, because Andrade is a two-weight division champion. Eddie Hearn said it best when it came to David Morrell. He said that David Benavidez, of course he didn't take the fight with David Morrell. Why the hell would you? Why the hell would a lot of fighters take the fight with David Morrell right now? He's very inexperienced. He doesn't have a belt. You're not going to get a massive payday for fighting him. So why the hell overall would you want to fight him? It just doesn't make any damn sense unless you just want to get in there, improve your skill set so bad, or possibly suffer an ass whooping. But David Benavidez knows that he's very close to that Canelo Alvarez fight, and he knows that if he beats Demetrius Andrade, which apparently is, from what I hear, that is the correct way to say it, Andrade, when it comes down to it, why the hell would David Benavidez want to take a fight with David Morrell when he has Andrade and he can get the Canelo Alvarez fight possibly that way? So I don't blame David Benavidez taking that fight.
Number one contender for 2 years, but he's doing whatever he's doing. So now I just want to make a lane for myself and fight the best fighters I could possibly fight.
Let me also mention this, and not to talk about Tyson Fury too much here. Isn't that very interesting how the LDBC and the media, all these pro-blackity black channels, they were so crazy about, when Dillian White was Deontay Wilder's mandatory, and all they were saying is that, oh, White ain't shit. Dillian White ain't shit. He got knocked out by this guy, that guy. But then when it came to Tyson Fury, when Dillian White was his mandatory, all of a sudden Fury needs to fight him or he's ducking him. Isn't that interesting, once again, how their favorites come into play?
Demetrius Andrade is a great fighter, very technical, very sneaky. So I think this is going to be a great test for myself, but I am going to come out victorious.
Yeah, and tell me, because so many of you guys, Andrade's been chasing Canelo for a long time too. Is it now where you're at the point where you're like, you know what? If I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. I'm just going to keep plugging forward.
Yeah, basically. Like I said,
I think that that's the best mindset to have for both fighters. Unfortunately for Demetrius Boo Andrade, I think that he had that mindset way too late. Once again, you're not going to get a lot of these big fights just by purely chasing after that one fighter, because a lot of the times the fans aren't going to corner you into a fight anyway. And, and like I said, Demetrius Andrade, he just doesn't have enough of a vibrant fan base for a lot of the Mexican fans or a lot of Canelo Alvarez fans to really say, Canelo, go fight that guy. People really don't give a shit whether Demetrius Andrade gets a big fight or not. They don't like him. They don't care. And they don't find him to be overall a very fan-pleasing style. Now, at the end of the day, that's not a mentality that I think that people should have. But at the end of the day, most people, they're casual boxing fans and they let their emotions get in the way of things. It just is what it is. But, that's why a lot of these fighters, they're not too hot on fighting someone like an Andrade, because he's decently crafty, he's somewhat dangerous, and he just has no reward, basically, if you're going to fight him. Why the hell would some of these other guys fight them when they could possibly face, Jamal Charlo or some of these other guys for pretty much equal reward and praise?
Make my own lane. I don't want to just keep waiting for a fight with Canelo. I mean, when it happens, great. Want to be more than ready for it. But right now, like I said, I want to fight the best fighters. I want to get my own experience. But
just to state this, I think David Benavidez knows that Canelo Alvarez, that he's going to have to take this fight with him. I think David Benavidez knows that. And I think that he's in a comfortable position because I think he knows that if Canelo Alvarez does not take the fight with him, if he ends up victorious in the Demetrius Andrade fight, that Canelo Alvarez, that he's going to end up in a very cornered position or a very pressurized situation. But like I said, I've never seen Canelo Alvarez backed into a corner and him just refusing to take a fight. at least the fight that the majority of fans were asking for.
My own pay-per-views now without Canelo, so I'm making my own lane, and I'm going to be the best, the greatest fighter of my generation.
Do you think that now that he is signed on with the PBC, there's a better chance that you get that fight now?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a better chance of making this fight happen. I think it was a 3-fight deal, so we'll see what happens. But
I think Canelo Alvarez plans to fight the winner of this fight, and I think he expects it and wants it to be that of David Benavidez. But I think that he will probably fight another fighter right after David Benavidez. This is my personal view of it. I think that he signed a 3 Showtime fight deal for a reason. I think that the first fight, it was either going to be against Jamal Charlo or Jamel Charlo. That way he could kind of shut people, up about, oh, he's ducking the Charlo brothers and black fighters, all sort of stuff. That way he could kind of, stall that, for the moment. And once again, I've never really been a big fan of that narrative anyway, because once again, Canelo has fought the likes of Austin Trout, Erislandy Lara, Danny Jacobs, Jamel Charlo, and even some other fighters that I'm potentially not even mentioning. Floyd Mayweather, and of course he lost that fight, but once again, he still took those fights, and he won the majority of them. He won all those fights, except the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight. So once again, I've always given Canelo Alvarez a lot of credit, but I think that, don't be surprised if Canelo fights Munguia or Jamal Charlo or, another fighter right before that of David Benavidez, just to build the fight up a little bit more and to get another great name on his resume. Because I think that Canelo Alvarez knows that if there is a fighter that is possibly going to take his throne at the 168-pound weight division, I think he knows that it is going to be David Benavidez. So I think that he probably wants to stack on as what would look at like another big name on his resume before he's going to take that of David Benavidez. Just my personal view.
At the end, like I said, at the end of the day, I'm not.
And I don't really have a problem with that as long as it's a fighter, in my view, that, is acceptable. Jamal Charlo, in my view, would be acceptable. Munguia, maybe. That's not really a fighter that I would like to see Canelo fight next, but I would kind of get the marketing appeal just because they're both Mexican and Munguia is an undefeated fighter. But we'll see.
My mind isn't 100% focused on Canelo. My mind is dominating the 168-pound division.
So in your last fight, you get the win over your longtime rival in Caleb Plant, who, by the way, told us on The Last Stand he wants a rematch. He certainly won a lot of.
Well, Caleb Plant is not going to win a rematch against David Benavidez. Is no offense against Caleb Plant, although I think that he was a A- level fighter. When it comes down to it. And I would still say that he's probably about an A- because it's not like, a lot of these LDBC and new media channels, they like to act like Caleb Plant is some bum, especially when Canelo Alvarez beat him. But remember, when David Benavidez fought him, it was one of the biggest fights in boxing. Remember that? Remember that? So Caleb Plant, he's at least an A- level boxer. In my view, he's around the same level as that of a Jamal Charlo and Jamel Charlo. He's not any higher than that, but he's still around an A-. But I just don't think that Caleb Plant overall has the stamina. I don't think that he has the conditioning. I don't think that he has the defense. And I don't think that he has the type of style nor confidence, nor the multi-dimensional, type of styles, in order to beat David Benavidez. He's a guy that really likes to fight on the back foot and kind of likes to peck you apart. And at times you are going to have to gain David Benavidez's respect. And he did that somewhat within the first half of the fight, but as the fight went along, I think that the conditioning got to that of Caleb Plant. And on top of that, I also just think that Caleb Plant, that he just didn't really know what to do once his main game plan wasn't working.
Early rounds, and then you took over really in the second half of the fight. What did you think about your performance?
I thought it was a great performance. To be honest with you, I'm a little upset at myself that I didn't get the stoppage.
I thought that it was a good performance. I'm not sure if I'm going to say great, but I thought that it was a good performance. But of course, that being the biggest fight of David Benavidez' career, the fact that he probably won that fight about 8 rounds to 4, maybe some would say 7 rounds to 5, that I don't mind David Benavidez saying it was a great performance.
I think if we would have done some things a little bit different, we would have got it. But it was a great fight overall. I feel like it lived up to the hype.
Yep.
We gave the fans a massive fight, a massive event, and a fight for the yearbooks to remember. And like I said, we won the fight, but ultimately, Caleb Plant won my respect too.
Oh, nice. Now, people wrote all about that fight, and I want you to. Boxing News wrote talking about you. Talking about you, and they say it was obvious, talking about you here, that he killed himself making weight. His face looked drawn, his body emaciated. It's time he move up to 175. Your thoughts?
They've been saying that since I've been fighting at 168. They always say that, but that's the process of making weight. If I kill myself to make weight, I wouldn't have looked how I looked in the fight, especially later on.
Well, listen, Mr. David Benavidez, and I understand what you're trying to say, but listen, the jig is up. We all know that you're not really a natural 168 pounder. I'm not going to say that David Benavidez is killing himself necessarily to get to 168, but he's missed weight before. At the end of the day, it's very clear that he's bigger than all those other guys at 168 pounds. He's at the very least a natural light heavyweight or 175 pounder. There's no doubt about it. David Benavidez is not a natural 168 pounder. And that's also going to be very interesting to see how Demetrius Andrade is going to deal with it. And if he can at least put up as good of a fight as what Caleb Plant did. Because Andrade is probably a guy that's around the same size as that of Caleb Plant. He could easily fight at 168. But Benavidez, especially for this being Andrade's second fight there, and him still not being accustomed to it, the fact that David Benavidez is probably a natural light heavyweight, not only with the way that he probably rehydrates or walks around at, but also with the fact that, he's a dude that's about 6'2", with a 73-inch arm reach, I'm guessing at the very least. It's going to be very interesting to see how he handles that.
The rounds, my endurance came out. I dominated the second half of the fight, so how could they say I killed myself making weight?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I have been at this weight class for a long time, but this is a sacrifice I had to make the biggest fights happen. I'm barely 26 years old, so I'm getting stronger. I think I'll move up to 175.
David Benavidez is 26 years old. I want to see how much longer his career actually lasts. Because even if he becomes undisputed at the 168-pound weight division and defeats Andrade and Canelo, once again, that 175-pound weight division. But of course, that being said, Artur Beterbiev is like, 40, 41 years old? That's going to be very interesting. If Benavidez beats Artur Beterbiev or Beterbiev ends up getting beaten, are these guys going to claim that Beterbiev was past his prime or not past, or, not at his best? The same way that Fury, when he beat Klitschko at 39, but was still the complete undisputed champ and still clearly was at a very great point in his career, how he beat a Klitschko that was washed up, or how Mayweather was a grandpa at 36 years old, or all these other bullshit excuses that I see these LDBC and new media fan bases make. Are they going to say the same thing for Beterbiev? I highly doubt it, but, it's going to be interesting. But Beterbiev is, aging. He is 40 to 41 years old. He still looks very good, but I don't know how much longer he's going to be around. And then, of course, you have Dimitri Bivol. I don't really know how old he is. I'm going to guess he's about 32, 33. Maybe a bit younger. I don't know.
It's coming soon, but not right now.
When you mean that, what does that mean, coming soon?
For like in 3 or 4 fights.
Okay.
I just want to get the best fights I could get at this weight class. Like I said, it's a sacrifice, man. I've been here trying to get the biggest fights, and now that I finally get my own pay-per-views, I'm going to fight the best fighters at 168.
But, if those guys are around and if they're just as dominant as what they were before, I'm just not quite sure if I see David Benavidez lasting until 35 or 36 or boxing and being, as great as what he was in his younger years. Because that 175-pound weight division is a very rough weight division, especially if those two great fighters stick around.
I feel like I have 15 years left in my professional career. I already got 10, so I got another 15.
We'll see about that, David, because, and I root for everybody. I don't wish ill will upon anybody. Once again, I don't really have a fanboy mentality. But we'll see about that, Mr. David Benavidez, because you don't come across to me as a guy, just in my personal view, that has a type of style that's going to last for 15 or 16 years.
So, with patience, patience. I'm going to get up to 175.
I'm sure you already seen it. Tim Bradley has been talking about the fight with Andrade, and I'm quoting him. Quote, Benavidez looked horrible in his last fight against Caleb Plant last March, getting out boxing the early going, taking over in the second half of the fight, only because Caleb Plant gassed out down the stretch of the contest. Against Boo Boo Andrade, who...
I think saying that David Benavidez looked horrible is overstating it a little bit. But like I said, I don't think that I can quite say that it was a great performance. I think that I can say it was a good performance, but to say that it was a great performance, I think that might be overstating it a little bit. A great performance is what I think of when I seen Canelo versus Caleb Plant. And a lot of people, for whatever reason, when I talk about that fight or when I see others talking about that fight, they say, "Oh man, Caleb Plant won like 5 rounds in that fight." Like, dude, what are you talking about? Caleb Plant won about 3 rounds in that Canelo Alvarez fight, man. Like, I'm sorry, but no. That's what I'm thinking of. If I'm thinking about a great performance, I'm thinking about probably, of course, Crawford versus Spence, or something like that. Of course, that was an exceptional performance because so that's going to raise the bar a little bit high. But I'm not quite sure if I can say that Benavidez that he had a great performance. I would say it was good to very good, especially since that was probably the biggest fight of his career. But I'm not going to say that it was a great performance. I think that would be going a little bit too far.
Is a better boxer.
But of course, I wouldn't say that he looked horrible either.
He's got more power. I think he can expose David Benavidez.
Well, that's why we fight the fights at the end of the day, right? I don't really care about what Tim Bradley has to say about me. At the end of the day, if Caleb Plant outboxed me, maybe his gas tank should have been a little bit better, and he should have beat me. Tim Bradley knows better than everybody.
I agree, and let me also state this, because these excuses have got to stop whenever it comes to the sport of boxing. I see it with some of these guys, like, oh, if his gas tank would have not went out, he would have outboxed him. Or, oh, if he was shorter, if he was in a different division, all sort of shit. Like, I hear it especially, whenever it comes, to certain fighters, like, oh, if he, was, 5'9" instead of 6'2", or, with Fury, for example, I get guys that, say, oh, well, if Fury was 6'3" and not 6'9". It's like, yeah, but what does that really say? Because at the end of the day, they are, and it's a part of their package. And when you're going to be a bigger fighter, at times you're going to look a little bit, not as swift at times because, you have a bigger package to carry around. When it comes down to, you have bigger luggage. So at the end of the day, they're going to look a little bit slower, at times. That's just how it is. But David Benavidez, now we all know that he has a little bit of flaws. In my view, he doesn't have the best of feet. He doesn't have the greatest head movement. He doesn't have the greatest defense I've ever seen. But he's good enough in a certain amount of those categories to where he usually does well. I don't think he's exceptional in any of the categories that I just mentioned. I don't think he has good feet at all. His head movement certainly could be better, but he did improve it a little bit in the last fight. And his defense, probably could be better, but, it's at least not horrible.
You know what I mean? So there's always going to be critics. People are going to say what they want to say. But at the end of the day, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I love what I do, and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to continue to work hard.
How is it training for this fight? Is it similar than Plant? Only, obviously, southpaw, so that's different. Is it somewhat similar?
Yeah, it's somewhat similar. He does things different than Caleb Plant. But, it's mostly the same fight. It's going to be me trying to go hunt down the fighter. So it's going to be a great fight, man. I'm excited for...
I'm wondering if David Benavidez really thinks that there's much difference between Andrade and Caleb Plant, because that one interview that I seen with David Benavidez, he said, you know what, to be honest, I really just don't see that much of a difference. I'm wondering if David Benavidez, or it almost sounded like he was saying that, maybe I just misread it, I don't know, but it almost sounds like he just thinks that Andrade and Caleb Plant, that they're about the same fighter. I do think that Andrade is more intelligent than Caleb Plant, and I think that he can fight in more of a multitude of ways. So I do think that this is probably going to be a debatable, more dangerous fight than that of Caleb Plant. But that being said, Andrade is also very inexperienced when it comes to fighting top caliber competition.
The good fights, this is what really motivates me. Great.
And a lot of people, once again, they say that Caleb Plant don't have no power, but it isn't that he doesn't really have any power. It's just that he isn't a guy that has one-shot knockout power, and he doesn't have the type of style to where he's going on the knockout. But there was a couple of times where he was able to push David Benavidez back, and to be honest with you, just to talk about athleticism, do I believe that Andrade is really above Caleb Plant in terms of athleticism? No. I think that Demetrius Andrade is ahead of him, probably in terms of boxing IQ. But do I think that the power is going to be greater than Caleb Plant's? More than likely not. Now, it may seem greater in certain spots, because I think Andrade will be willing to exchange more. But we'll see.
Fights. And I've been training like an animal. I've been training like a monster, so I'm ready for what comes my way.
Okay, now do you believe that you got to have like a spectacular performance, considering the Canelo fight could be on the horizon, to lure him in now, and especially against a guy who been wanting Canelo as well? Do you say, look, I knocked this guy out, Canelo, let's go?
Yeah, I feel like right now all the fights are the biggest fight. All my upcoming fights are the biggest fights of my career. So I gotta show out every single fight. But at the end of the day, I work extremely hard. This is what I love to do. This is my passion. And I think with that, when you have a passion for your sport, you ultimately get better. And no matter what, if it's a big fight or not.
I definitely agree.
And I've been working extremely hard, and I'm going in there to make a splash, like how all my fights have been. You ask me the same question every time and all the fights are like the previous fights. I go in there and I do what I got to do.
What'd you think of his performance against Charlo?
And all the fights are like the previous fights, and I understand that, Mr. David Benavidez, but let's also be real. You haven't really been fighting that great of fighters throughout your career. Like a lot of these fighters, like Terrence Bud Crawford and some of these other guys, they always get offended when certain people say that, oh, I don't have the deepest resume. And that's not me saying that it's always completely their fault. But it's like, dude, come on. You like you can't sit here and tell me overall that the fighters that you've been fighting, that they're super comparable to that of Caleb Plant and Andrade and Canelo. Like, you're not going to sit here and tell me that.
And he said afterwards that finally I'm healthy. And I showed everybody that I'm pound for pound best fighter in the world.
I thought it was a good performance. I'm not going to come on here and criticize Canelo. I think he did what he had to do. It was a good fight, and he got the victory.
Well, if you're a long time...
Well, it was a good performance. It wasn't a good fight because Jermell Charlo basically went there to lay down and take the payday.
Listener or been watching the program for a long time, because I started taking a stress management, redefine that contains a probiotic, take ownership. Travel packs / But I don't think the power isn't there anymore. He had a lot of opportunities to finish Charlo, but he never really hurt him. Canelo couldn't finish.
Yeah, and it was he's fighting in the 18-by-18 ring. Charlo didn't really have any room to move. He didn't really throw that much either. So I was expecting him to get a knockout, but he couldn't get a knockout. I don't know. Maybe his power is going away. I don't know.
How interested are you?
Just to talk about, of course, and the question that they were asking is that since Canelo Alvarez was not able to get the knockout against that of Jermell Charlo, do you believe that Canelo Alvarez's power has disappeared? And I'm not really going to go there. I'm not going to say that, or not disappeared really, but that, that his power has decreased in any way. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to go that far. I mean, maybe if I see Canelo in other fights and it just appears that his power isn't able to affect him whatsoever, then maybe I'd be a little bit concerned, but I think that the power is still there. And I think that that's a part of the reason why Jermell Charlo, the whole entire time, he was fighting like a damn Girl Scout in there. He was fighting like he was just trying to get out of there, and I think that that's a part of the reason why Canelo also did not get more knockdowns or the stoppage in the fight, because Jermell Charlo was not trying to exchange with Canelo Alvarez at all. He wasn't trying to do anything in that fight. All he did was run around that ring for 12 rounds. And I'm not usually one that, uses, that term, when it comes down to, but when you're just moving around the ring and you're not willing to exchange, trying to push the fight at all, and even on the back foot, you're not even throwing shit. Like when Lara fought Canelo, I didn't really consider that too much running. What I consider running is when you're on basically the retreat the whole entire time and you're not throwing anything on the front foot, the back foot, in the clinch, nothing. Like you have no plan of attack. All your plan is to escape and to survive. And that's what Jermell Charlo clearly showed. And that's why his stock has majorly went down after that fight, because people realized it. And of course, a lot of, let's be real, the racial fans from that of the LDBC and new media, they were disappointed because they were hoping that Jermell Charlo was going to put up a much better performance, and was going to possibly defeat Canelo Alvarez. It didn't happen.
You to see how his brother Jermall Charlo looks, considering he's fighting your brother.
It's going to be a great fight, man. I'm excited. My brother's been working extremely hard, and my brother's going to pull one of the biggest upsets of this year, because I know he's going to go in there and beat Charlo.
Well, no, he's not. But I understand, the loyalty, of course, towards your brother. I understand it. What is David Benavidez supposed to say? I don't think my brother has much of a chance. Of course, you're supposed to instill confidence, within that of your family and your friends. Listen, I get it. All that is cool. But me talking, do I believe that Jose Benavidez has any chance against that of Jermall Charlo? Not if Jermall Charlo actually comes in decent form. And even with Jermall Charlo possibly in a mental state to where he may not be, the most mentally healthy at the moment, when it comes down to it. And once again, isn't that very interesting that a lot of these guys, they said that Ryan Garcia was using that as an excuse, but Jermall Charlo backs out of the Canelo Alvarez fight because of mental health, and it wasn't an excuse. Isn't that very interesting? And once again, if you want to say that the man had legitimate health issues, that's your prerogative. I have no problem with that. But then let's keep the same standards here when other fighters also say that for mental health. But when it comes down to, once again, even Jamal Charlo at a weakened state, at least possibly mentally, I think more than likely that Jamal should be able to dominate that fight and potentially stop him.
Really?
Because Jose Benavidez, no offense against him, but he's never really been the greatest fighter in the world.
I love that. What'd you make of Caleb Plant smacking Jamal Charlo?
I don't want to get in between whatever they got going on, but it was kind of crazy, bro. To be honest with you, I don't know. It was. I'm not gonna say it was. It was funny. I'm not gonna lie. It was funny. But, I mean, he has to go redeem himself. I mean, if I got slapped like that, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, Plant says he wants Charlo next.
Yeah.
You know the deal. We let people.
That'd be a great fight. I'm not really quite sure who would win that fight. Both at their best, I'm not really quite sure who would win that fight. And I'm not quite sure if either of them are quite at their mental best anymore, because Caleb Plant has now suffered 2 losses, and I can assure you that once you get knocked out the way that he did against Canelo Alvarez, that's always going to be in the back of your mind. A fighter is never the same after that. So it's going to be interesting. And on top of that, Jamal Charlo, he seems to be in a little bit of a weakened state. So that's going to be a very interesting fight.
The big question.
If, of course, Jamal Charlo is willing to take the fight, because Jamal Charlo, I mean, how many big fights has he really been in his career? Julian J. Rock Williams, and that's about it.
We got a number of them for you. EG Boxing asks, how has Al Heyman promised you the Canelo fight next?
No, he hasn't promised me anything. I feel like Canelo, he really runs the show. Mm-hmm. So I mean, they can't promise me something and then something happens where it doesn't happen. So obviously he signed a 3-fight deal. So I mean, this is the name of the game is patience.
Yeah.
So we're just patiently waiting. But we're fighting great fighters in the meantime.
Richie asks, do you think Canelo will retire without ever fighting you? And would that affect his legacy, knowing it's the fight everybody's wanting?
I think it would definitely affect his legacy. I don't think he retires without fighting me, because...
I agree with both of those sentiments. I don't think that Canelo does retire without fighting David Benavidez, because I think Canelo Alvarez knows what the majority of the public thinks. Of course, you have a lot of these LDBC and new media channels that allege that, Canelo was avoiding David Benavidez and he won't ever fight, all these other morons. But those guys are pretty much pro-racial idiots. They're in a pro-black cult, but Canelo Alvarez, he's usually going to accept that of the big fight that everyone is asking for, but he's going to make sure, that it definitely is worth his time and, worth his, patience. Basically what I mean is that he's going to make sure that it pretty much, that goose is fattened up. That way it's ripe for the eating. That way overall he gets a good payday. And that way overall that if he does win the fight, that it's going to earn him even greater legacy points, because now he has a win over that of Caleb Plant and potentially Demetrius Andrade.
Canelo, he's a warrior. He's a warrior, and he's not...
And if he did not fight David Benavidez, it would still make Canelo an all-time great. It wouldn't really change him in my rankings, but it would affect his legacy to the degree to where it would just be such a black mark and a black X. People would be asking him for the rest of his life, why did you not fight David Benavidez? That was the fight that we were all asking for.
He takes challenges. You can say whatever you want about him, but he takes challenges. I think...
Agreed, sir. Thank you for saying that, because I get these morons on my channel all the time saying, oh, Canelo, he overall is going to fight David Benavidez at a major catchweight. He won't fight David Benavidez. He's always avoiding the best. Once again, dude, that doesn't make any sense with a fighter that has fought the likes of Lara, Trout, Cotto, Kovalev, Plant, Saunders, Smith, Jacobs, Golovkin, all these fighters, Chavez Jr., all these fighters on his resume. Canelo has fought about a dozen A-grade level fighters. Like I said, you want to go talk shit about a fighter not accepting big fights, go talk about Gervonta Tank Davis and why he hasn't fought any legitimate A-grade fighter in his career. Go talk about Gervonta Tank Davis.
The thing is that he moves when he wants to move, at his time. So I feel like the fight's going to happen just when he wants it to happen.
JW asks, what's the difference preparing for Boo Boo compared to Plant?
The difference from comparing the Boo Boo to Plant, obviously, the southpaw. And everybody has their own flaws.
Once again, I'm really wondering if Benavidez thinks that Andrade is much more of a threat than that of Caleb Plant. I don't think that he really sees any major difference between that of Andrade and Caleb Plant. And once again, in my personal view, and I've always said this, in terms of their level, in terms of how good they are, I don't really know if I see a major difference either. I mean, I think that Andrade is probably more skilled than Caleb Plant. Do I think that it's a world's difference? No, not me personally. But when it comes down to, once again, it's going to be very interesting to see, what adjustments or differences Andrade can make.
Every different fighter, there's something, if you study them enough, there's stuff that you see that they do that they have different habits and different punches land on them. So it's just, every fighter is different, you know what I mean? But technically, they're the same fighter. They use the ring around a lot, they say.
And that's the second time David Benavidez has said that. So what is he saying? I don't see any difference or any major difference between that of Andrade and that of Caleb Plant. And what I will say is this, you do have to be careful with that, because there is certain differences between that of Andrade and Caleb Plant. Andrade, I have no doubt about it, is going to be willing to exchange it with you a little bit more. Will that surprise David Benavidez? We'll see.
A lot of traps, they set a lot of baits. So.
But the question also will be about Mr. Demetrius Andrade. Where overall is he going to be able to handle that power? Or excuse me, that's not the right way to phrase it. But how is he going to be able to handle that power, in that size? And if he starts feeling punches, is he going to be able to take it? And is he going to be able to fight back?
He's more of a boxer. He's not a puncher.
This last one asks, are there
Agreed.
any plans on you moving up after the Andrade and Canelo fight to 175? And do you have any interest in fighting Beterbiev or Bivol?
Yeah, I definitely do want to fight Bivol. When I get to 175, we had a lot of great sparring sessions, me and that guy, so I feel like it's time for us to...
Interesting overall that he didn't mention Beterbiev. But I'm not going to go too hard on David Benavidez right there. He just might be purely excited more about the Bivol fight, because him and Bivol, of course, have been former sparring partners.
Told the world.
Really?
Sparred him a lot. Yeah, he's a good fighter. But
those
was a war.
I'll tell you what, a lot of people especially, they're not they're not throwing themselves at Artur Beterbiev, and there's certain flaws that Beterbiev has, but a lot of these guys, especially when he was in that Marcus Brown fight, like you had a lot of these LDBC and new media guys, or these guys that thought that Artur Beterbiev was just going to be this stiff, unskilled white boy, and that all he was just this Rocky type of fighter. Of course, talking about Sylvester Stallone Rocky, and that he had nothing but power and that he was super sloppy. And then they realized from that fight that he was way, way different. Artur Beterbiev is a real deal fighter. He has some flaws. He doesn't have the greatest head movement. At times he can be a little bit stiff, but he counters very decently well. He can fight a little bit on the back foot and on the front foot, and he just has bone-crushing power. Like Beterbiev, man, that motherfucker, that dude can punch.
Yeah, that's why I know when we give the fans that fight, it's going to be a legendary fight.
I love it. All right, here we go. We like the last segment of the show. It is the last stand. You got a series of questions. Just give me the first thing that comes to your mind. In your heart of heart, do you believe Canelo really wants to fight you?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so as well, and I believe so as well. Now, I believe, David Benavidez as well. I also believe that Canelo wants to fight him. Do I think that Canelo wants to fight Andrade necessarily? No, because I think that he thinks that the David Benavidez fight would be bigger for him. And on top of that it would be a style that, in his view, would be a little bit more beatable. So make no mistake about it, Canelo is going to be rooting for David Benavidez to win this fight.
Biggest threat,
at least just in my personal view,
to the undisputed super middleweight title not named David Benavidez?
David Morrell.
100% agreed, and I appreciate your honesty, sir. And once again, I have no problem with him not accepting that David Morrell fight. I have no problem with it. It's just very interesting to see some of these channels, once again, that love to nut hug Canelo, love to talk shit all day about him not accepting the David Morrell fight or some of these other fights. I've not heard anything about overall David Benavidez not taking the David Morrell fight.
Do you believe your world title will come at 168 or at 175?
Both. 168 then 175.
I like it. I like it. Who do you believe is pound for pound best fighter in the world right now?
I got to give my top three. Inoue, Terrence Crawford, and Usyk.
That's a great pick. That's definitely a great top three. Once again, I've already told people my top 5 pound for pound. in no particular order. I have Terrence Bud Crawford there. I have Canelo Alvarez there. I have Usyk in a way. And I also have Tyson Fury there. And of course, a lot of people would disagree. They've always disagreed with me about the Tyson Fury one. But listen, at the end of the day, Fury is at his best anyway, which I do not believe he was at his best for the Francis Ngannou fight. So if you wanted to drop him off of the top five, I understand. But at the end of the day, certain people had Deontay Wilder on their top 10 pound for pound list when he was defeating nobodies. I never had him there. But Fury, at the end of the day, is clearly the greatest heavyweight of his era. He's a guy that defeated Vladimir Klitschko when he was top 5 pound for pound and was the unified champion. He was able to completely outbox him in that fight, at least to the point to where it was a clear unanimous decision. He was also able to defeat Deontay Wilder very clearly on 3 separate occasions, including that first fight, which was a robbery draw, when it came down to it. But, it is what it is. But anyways, so I would also have Tyson Fury there, even though a certain amount of people would disagree. But yes, Tyson Fury is one of the world's top fighters when he is at his best.
Were you surprised of Crawford's performance against Spence?
I was surprised. It was a great fight.
I was a little bit surprised as well. And like I said in my fight review, I wasn't necessarily surprised that Terrence Bud Crawford won the fight. When it comes to fights like that, you're not really surprised at either man who ends up winning the fight because it's so razor thin close. I'm not really even 100% completely shocked that Crawford was able to dominate the fight a little bit more. But the thing that surprised me the most is that just his level of power in that fight. I mean, it was insane. Now, to be fair, Terrence Bud Crawford is associated with that of the snack program. And I have, stated that, my suspicions of that, especially since they're with former drug cheat Victor Conte, probably still drug cheat, but, it is what it is. None of these other channels mention it. Do I believe that Crawford is probably on a special something? Yeah, probably, but it is what it is. A lot of these other fighters are, so I won't penalize him that much. But Terrence Bud Crawford, let me tell you what, that dude, he showed a level of power that I did not think that he had in that fight. That dude was phenomenal.
I know both.
I mean, he moved Errol Spence around like a teenager.
Man, so it was a great fight, but it was a great performance by
And like an 11-year-old teenager.
Crawford.
Who is your favorite fighter? Who's the guy, David Benavidez? Like, people always say, man, I love watching David Benavidez fight.
Now or?
Yeah, now.
Now?
Like, when you say, man, I got to watch this guy fight, man.
To be honest with you, I like watching everybody fight. I like Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis, Boots, Ennis, Rolly, Usyk, everybody. Okay. I'm a fan of boxing.
I like a lot of those fighters. Some of those guys are also my favorite to watch, with the exception of Rolly Romero, who can box worth of shit, and that of Ryan Garcia, who's relatively talented, but I just think that he has a little bit too many flaws to ever become a exceptional fighter, an elite supremacy fighter. I just don't ever see it.
And the day I love watching everybody.
Last but not least, biggest fight for David Benavidez at 168, not named Canelo Alvarez.
The biggest fight with me at 168 would be, there's 2 of them, Jaime Munguia and David Morrell.
I like that. God.
Very interesting. So apparently there's recent plans to have Jaime Munguia at 160. And I wonder if Jaime Munguia, if he ends up fighting that to David Benavidez, if the LDBC and the media, they're not going to have a problem with it. But then Canelo Alvarez, he fights Jaime Munguia, and everyone is going to have a problem with it. But, that's how they roll, because they know they have to tear down Canelo Alvarez, because they know that he is the biggest threat, overall, to become eventually into the greatest of all time conversation in their minds. Now, do I believe that Canelo will ever be there? I'm not quite sure. But Canelo right now, as I've already stated, is within my top 30 pound per pound of all time, or at least around there. If he ends up defeating that of David Benavidez, he'll have to go within my top 20, debatable top 10 of all time. Because he just has too many big names and too many great wins on his resume and too much skill, even though, of course, he still does have some flaws like his feet, and some other stuff like that. But, he would be up there with a lot of other great fighters. If he defeated David Benavidez, in my view, the debate would be ended as him as the greatest Mexican fighter of all time.
Dang, I like that. So, here's the one
Even though, of course, one person also could mention the steroids. But,
thing I like about talking about you, because David Benavidez is always going to tell you the truth. Other cats are like tell you all kind of You just shoot it straight.
At the end of the day, I feel like we have to give the respect to boxing. And then when I answer questions, when you ask me, I have to answer them honestly, 100% honest. I kind of let ego and character, I get it out the way. But when we're talking boxing, I want the fans to really know what I'm talking about, me being really honest.
We'll wrap it up with this. When you gone to sleep at night and thought about this fight, do you think it ends in a stoppage or it goes the distance?
I want this fight to end in a stoppage. No, it will end in a stoppage. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to stop Demetrius Andrade. Like I said, I'm going to go out there and do what I do. You know, they call me the Mexican Monster for a reason.
You're right. And I took...
That's a heavy warning to that of Mr. Demetrius Andrade. That I'm a little bit disappointed in my last performance that I could not get the stoppage over Caleb Plant. I know that this is going to be the biggest fight of my career. And I know that this is going to lead me to the Canelo Alvarez fight. So you better be prepared because I'm coming there and I'm going to really try and bust your ass up. That's basically what David Benavidez is saying to that Demetrius Andrade. You better be prepared for someone to kill you in that ring. Otherwise, you're not making it out of there.
What? He is a beast at 168. Appreciate you, man. Good luck. I can't wait to see you on Showtime pay-per-view.
Thank you.
Listen, that's what we do here on The Last Stand. We bring the biggest names in the sport. And at 168, this guy's right here at the top, David Benavidez. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it for this interview. I thought that it was very particularly interesting, but I always like to hear David Benavidez talk. I think that he has the right mindset to have a great amount of success. I just don't know if he has the skill set. So once again, we'll see what happens. But David Benavidez, it's always very interesting to hear him talk. Demetrius Andrade as well, just to kind of pick the brains of the fighters a little bit. But David Benavidez, it seems like he has a high degree of confidence. It seems to me that he has a higher degree of confidence than that of Demetrius Andrade. Just my personal view of it. But we'll see what happens. But going to be very interesting. Anyways, that's pretty much about it. This is going to be a very great fight. Could go either way. You know, kind of like the Caleb Plant fight. But we'll see. We'll see. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.